A pregnant girl was cast out by her family, until a silent cowboy took her in and discovered the truth. She arrived barefoot, bruised, and carrying nothing but shame. In towns like Deadmere Ridge, a girl with no ring and a rounded belly wasn't a person. She was a scandal. Her own family had shut the door. The pastor turned his face. And the sheriff? He just spat on the ground. But a man who hadn't spoken in 6 years offered her shelter. What he didn't know was that her silence hid a truth. That would change everything, especially the name carved on his brother's grave. Not every outlaw is a criminal, not every silence is empty, and not every child is born unwanted. The morning sun beat down on Deadmere Ridge like judgment itself, turning the dusty main street into a corridor of condemnation. Grace Holloway stood outside McCready's general store, her back straight despite the weight she carried, both in her belly and in her heart. She was 17, with auburn hair that caught fire in the harsh light and green eyes that had once danced with dreams. Now those eyes were dull with the particular exhaustion that comes from running out of places to run. Her father's wagon sat before her, loaded with everything the family owned except her. Samuel Holloway stood on the porch, his face carved from the same unforgiving stone as the desert mountains. Her mother sat in the wagon, not looking, not able to look. Her younger brothers peered from behind the canvas, confused and frightened. "You're not my daughter anymore," Samuel's voice carried across the street like a whip crack. "Holloway women don't spread their legs for promises and pretty words. You made your bed, now lie in it alone." "Papa, please," Grace's voice broke. "I have nowhere." "Should have thought of that before you shamed us." He turned his back, final as a closing tomb. "Anyone in this town who helps her is no friend of mine." The wagon pulled away, leaving dust and a daughter behind. Grace swayed, one hand protecting her unborn child, the other reaching for support that wasn't there. The general store's door slammed shut. Curtains twitched closed along the street. Even the stray dogs seemed to turn away. Pastor Williams emerged from his church, took one look and deliberately crossed to the other side of the street. Sheriff Baker, leaning against his office door, spat tobacco juice into the dust and muttered something about consequences of sin. Grace stood alone in the center of Deadmere Ridge, cast out and condemned, while the baby inside her kicked as if protesting the injustice of it all. The sun climbed higher, merciless, and she had no shade, no water, no hope. That's when she saw him. A shadow moved in the darkness of the blacksmith's barn. A man, tall and lean, wearing clothes that had seen better decades. He didn't approach. Folks said he never did. But something in his stillness drew her forward. The silent cowboy, they called him. Josiah Teller. He hadn't spoken a word since returning from the war 6 years ago. Lived alone on a failing ranch. Outside town, came in only for supplies and horseshoeing. Some said the war had stolen his voice. Others whispered darker theories, that he'd seen something, done something that words couldn't touch. Grace stumbled toward the barn, drawn by desperation and the strange safety of someone who couldn't condemn her with words. Her bare feet left bloody prints in the dust. Her father had taken even her shoes, saying whores didn't deserve them. Josiah stepped from the shadows as she approached. His face was weathered, but not old, maybe 35, with eyes the color of winter, sky and hands scarred from work and war. He looked at her swollen belly, her bloody feet, and her face tight with holding back tears. Then, without a word, he never spoke, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out bread wrapped in cloth. Fresh bread, probably meant for his own supper. He held it out to her with the careful movements of someone offering food to a wounded animal. Grace took it with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, then gestured to a water barrel in the corner of the barn. She drank deeply while he watched, and for the first time in weeks she didn't feel judged. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of understanding that went deeper than words. When she finished drinking, Josiah did something that shocked the hidden watchers peering from windows and doorways. He untied his horse, a sturdy mare named Sage, and helped Grace mount. Then, leading the horse on foot, he headed out of town toward his ranch. "Fool," someone muttered, "taking in a fallen woman." But Josiah Teller had been called worse, And Grace Holloway, cast out and carrying secrets heavier than her unborn child, followed the only kindness she'd been shown in months. Neither knew that their meeting wasn't chance but destiny, that the past they each carried would soon collide with truth sharp enough to break 6 years of silence and heal wounds older than memory. The sun continued its merciless path across the sky, but for the first time since her fall from Grace, Grace Holloway wasn't facing it alone. Josiah's ranch sat 3 miles from town, nestled in a valley where a thin creek struggled through the seasons. The main house was small but solid, built by hands that knew work. The barn stood larger than the house, priorities of a man who valued his animals' comfort over his own. He helped Grace dismount, steadying her with hands gentle despite their calluses. She expected to be shown to the barn. That's where fallen women slept if they were lucky enough to find shelter at all. Instead, Josiah led her to the house. Inside was sparse but clean. One room served as kitchen and living space, with a bedroom glimpsed through a doorway. Everything spoke of a life pared down to essentials: 1 plate, 1 cup, and 1 chair by the cold fireplace. On the mantel, a single photograph in a tarnished frame was turned face down. Josiah gestured to the bedroom, then to her, making his meaning clear. The room was hers. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I can't take your bed. The barn is fine." He cut her off with a sharp gesture, pointing again to the room. His eyes, those winter sky eyes, brooked no argument. This wasn't charity. This was what was right. While Grace settled hesitantly on the bed, the first soft surface she'd felt in days, Josiah busied himself in the kitchen. Soon the smell of beans and salt pork filled the small space. He served her at the table, then took his own portion, outside maintaining propriety even in isolation. After eating, exhaustion crashed over Grace like a wave. She'd been running for so long, first from the shame in her hometown of Silver Falls, then from town to town as her condition became impossible to hide. Dead Mare Ridge had been her last hope. Her mother's cousin lived there or used to. But family blood proved thinner than family reputation. She slept through the afternoon and into the night, her body finally safe enough to truly rest. She woke once to find a glass of water by the bed and an extra blanket laid over her. Josiah's kindness was silent but spoke volumes. In the morning, she emerged to find him already working, mending the fence near the house. He'd left breakfast on the table, eggs, precious and probably his last, with more bread and preserved peaches, a luxury she didn't deserve but desperately needed. "Mr. Teller," she called from the porch. He turned, acknowledging her. "I can work, I'm not looking for charity. I can cook, clean and mend. Whatever you need." He studied her, this young woman swollen with child but not with pride. Then he nodded, pointing to the garden plot behind the house. It was overrun with weeds, neglected like so much of the ranch. A man living alone had little use for vegetables when beans and salt pork would do. Grace understood. She could stay if she earned her keep. It was more than fair. It was dignity. As she worked in the garden that day, coaxing order from chaos, despite her ungainly state, Josiah continued his fence mending within sight. Neither spoke. He couldn't and she didn't need to. But the companionable silence wrapped around them like a blanket, warming spaces that words couldn't reach. That evening, she cooked a proper meal from the supplies she found. Amazing what a woman's touch could do with limited ingredients. Josiah ate at the table this time across from her, and something in his eyes seemed less frozen. After dinner, she noticed him looking at the overturned photograph on the mantel. His hand half reached for it, then withdrew. Whatever memories it held were still too sharp to touch. Grace didn't pry. She had her own sharp memories, the weight of a man who'd promised marriage, the taste of lies sweet as honey, the moment she'd known she was ruined. Everyone had stories better left unspoken. But as she prepared for bed in the room that still smelled faintly of leather and loneliness, she couldn't help but wonder, what had stolen this kind man's voice? What ghost haunted him so deeply that 6 years hadn't eased its grip? She didn't know that the answer lay hidden in a trunk in the barn, or that her own past was about to collide with his in ways that would shatter the silence between them. For now there was just safety, shelter, and the strange peace of being with someone who couldn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. A week passed in quiet rhythm. Grace tended the garden and house while Josiah worked the ranch. Her pregnancy made some tasks difficult, but she was determined to earn her keep. He never asked about the father, never judged her swelling belly. His silence was a gift she treasured more each day. The barn became her refuge during the heat. So of the afternoon, it was cooler there and she could rest on hay bales when her back ached too fiercely. That's where she found the trunk. It sat in the far corner, covered in dust and old horse blankets. She wouldn't have noticed it except that Sage, the mare, kept nosing at that corner whenever Grace entered. Finally, curious, she investigated. The trunk was military issue, with J. Teller, 5th Cavalry, stenciled on the side. Grace hesitated. This wasn't hers to open, but something, instinct perhaps, or the same force that had led her to Josiah's kindness, compelled her forward. Inside lay the artifacts of a life interrupted. A Union uniform, carefully folded. Medals she didn't recognize, letters tied with string. And there on top, as if recently placed, a small wooden box. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside lay a baby's hair ribbon, pale blue and water-stained. Beneath it, a tin-type photograph of a young woman holding an infant. The woman's face was delicate and beautiful, with eyes that seemed to hold secrets even in sepia stillness. But it was the ribbon that made Grace's heart stop. She knew that ribbon, knew the water stains weren't water but blood, washed out as best as someone could manage. She knew because she'd seen its twin and heard its story whispered in family gatherings when the adults thought children weren't listening. Her Aunt Maribel had worn ribbons just like this in her hair. Beautiful Maribel, who'd run away at 16 with a soldier boy, breaking her father's heart. Maribel, who'd written one letter saying she was happy, married and expecting a child. Maribel, who'd never written again. Grace's hands shook as she lifted the photograph, studying the woman's face. The resemblance to her mother was unmistakable. The same delicate features, the same determined chin. This was Maribel, her mother's twin sister, the family ghost no one spoke of except in whispers and warnings. But why did Josiah have her photograph? Her ribbon? The barn door creaked. Grace spun, guilty, still holding the evidence of her snooping. Josiah stood silhouetted in the doorway, his face unreadable. She expected anger, but what she saw was worse, pain so raw it took her breath away. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I shouldn't have." Sage kept nosing at it and He held up a hand, stopping her babble. Then, moving with the careful steps of a man approaching something dangerous, he came to the trunk. He took the photograph from her unresisting fingers and stared at it with eyes that had stared too long already. Then he looked at Grace, really looked at her, and she saw the moment he recognized what she'd already discovered. The resemblance, the family echoes in her features. His mouth opened and closed. For a moment she thought 6 years of silence might break, but no words came. Instead, he carefully returned the photograph to its box, closed the trunk, and walked out of the barn. Grace sat in the hay, mind spinning. Aunt Maribel had loved a soldier. Josiah had been a soldier. The ribbon, the photograph, the pain carved into every line of his body. That night, dinner was strained. The comfortable silence had become weighted, with unspoken questions. Grace wanted to ask, needed to know, but how could she demand answers from a man who couldn't give them? After the meal, as she cleaned the dishes, Josiah did something unexpected. He went to the mantel and turned the photograph there face up. Grace glimpsed it as she worked. The same woman from the tin type, older now, standing beside Josiah in his uniform. Both are smiling, both alive, Maribel and Josiah, her aunt and her protector, family connected by tragedy she didn't yet understand. That night, the baby kicked harder than usual, as if sensing the tension. Grace lay in Josiah's bed, Maribel's bed once, and tried to piece together the story. A soldier and a girl running away together. Marriage, a child, happiness. Then, what? What had stolen Josiah's voice and left him with only ribbons and photographs? Outside, she heard Josiah moving around the barn, restless as the horses. Whatever memories she'd stirred weren't settling easily. She touched her belly, thinking of her own story. Promises broken, trust betrayed, a man who'd fled when her condition became known. Would her child grow up with only photographs and ribbons too? Or could broken stories sometimes find better endings? The night gave no answers, only the sound of a man wrestling with ghosts and a young woman discovering that her family's shame might be more complicated than anyone had known. The pain started just after midnight. Grace woke gasping, her belly tight as a drum. Too soon, she had at least a month left, maybe more. But her body seemed to have other plans. "No," she whispered to the darkness. "Please, not now. Not here." Another contraction rolled through her, stealing breath and thought. This wasn't just discomfort. This was wrong. The baby was coming, ready or not. She tried to stand, to reach the door and to call for help. But the pain dropped her to her knees beside the bed. A strangled cry escaped her lips before she could stop it. Within seconds, Josiah was there. He'd been sleeping in the barn. She'd realized that after finding the trunk, but he moved like a man who'd learned to wake at the slightest sound of distress. He took in her position, the sweat on her face and the way she clutched her belly, and understanding dawned in his eyes. Without hesitation, he lifted her. Not to the bed, but to the main room, where he quickly built up the fire. He settled her in the chair, then began moving with efficient purpose, heating water, gathering clean cloths, and preparing for what was coming. Grace watched through pain-hazed eyes as this silent man became her lifeline. He'd done this before, she realized. The movements were too sure, too practiced. Another piece of the puzzle that was Josiah Teller. When the next contraction hit, he was there letting her grip his scarred hands, his strength anchoring her against the pain. His eyes never left her face, watching for signs of deeper distress. "It's too early," she gasped between contractions. "The baby—" He touched her face gently, shaking his head. His meaning was clear. Don't think about that. Focus on now. One breath, one moment, one push at a time. The hours blurred together. Pain and rest, pushing and panting. Josiah's steady presence the only constant. He never spoke, couldn't speak, but his face told her everything. "You're strong. You can do this. I won't leave you." As dawn light crept through the windows, Grace felt the baby crown. Terror and anticipation warred in her chest. What if the child was too small? What if it didn't survive? What if— Josiah's hands guided hers, showing her how to support the baby as it emerged. Together, in blood and silence and morning light, they brought new life into the world. A girl, tiny but perfect, with lungs that announced her arrival in no uncertain terms. Grace sobbed as Josiah placed the baby on her chest, the weight of her daughter more precious than gold. He tended them, both with gentle efficiency, cutting the cord, delivering the afterbirth, and cleaning and wrapping the baby in soft cloths he'd found somewhere. Through it all, his face held a mixture of joy and old sorrow that made Grace's heart ache. "She's beautiful," Grace whispered, touching her daughter's impossibly small fingers. "So beautiful." Josiah nodded, and for the first time, Grace saw tears on his weathered cheeks. He reached out tentatively, stopping just short of touching the baby. Grace caught his hand and guided it to her daughter's head. "You saved us," she said softly. "Both of us, thank you." He shook his head, pointing to her, then to the baby. His meaning was clear. "You saved yourselves. I just helped." As the morning progressed, Grace dozed fitfully, the baby nursing with surprising vigor for one so early. When she woke fully, she found Josiah had been busy. A cradle sat by the bed, rough-hewn but solid, obviously crafted in haste while she slept. Baby clothes lay folded nearby, pulled from somewhere in his mysterious stores. But it was the photograph on the bedside table that made her breath catch. The tintype from the trunk, Maribel holding her infant. Placed there deliberately like a blessing or a confession. "She was my aunt," Grace said quietly. "Maribel, my mother's twin sister." Josiah went very still. "She ran away with a soldier when she was 16. Wrote once that she was married, happy and expecting. Then nothing. The family assumed she was ashamed or dead or both." Grace studied his face. "But she wasn't ashamed, was she? She was happy. With you." For a long moment, Josiah stood frozen. Then slowly, like ice cracking on a winter pond, his mouth opened. No sound emerged, but his lips formed a single word. Yes. If this story moves something inside you, type "Truth always finds its voice" in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. There's more where this came from. The word hung in the air like a miracle. 6 years of silence, cracked but not quite broken. Grace held her breath, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had loosened his tongue. Josiah turned, away, shoulders shaking. When he faced her again, his eyes held a desperate need to communicate. He pointed to himself, then to the photograph, then made a gesture Grace understood, writing. "You want to write it? The story?" He nodded, relief flooding his features. He disappeared into the barn, returning with another item from that trunk. Of memories, a leather journal worn and weather-stained. He handed it to her with shaking hands. Grace opened it carefully, finding pages covered with neat handwriting that gradually became more cramped and more desperate. The date started 7 years ago, a year before the silence began. March 15th, 1865. Finally going home. 3 years of war, but we survived. Maribel waits with our son, little James, born while I was fighting. Her letters kept me alive. Tomorrow, I'll hold them both. Tomorrow our real life begins. March 18th, 1865. Found only ashes. Comancheros hit the settlement while the men were gone. No. Survivors. Found M's ribbon in the ruins, still tied around. I can't write it, can't speak it. The words burn my throat like smoke. Grace looked up, tears streaming. Josiah sat hunched in the chair, a man folded in on his grief. She continued, reading though each word cut like glass. March 20th, 1865, buried them beside the creek where M liked to wash clothes. 23 dead. My whole world in one small grave. Should have been here, should have protected them. Words are useless. What good are words when they couldn't call me home in time? April 1st, 1865. Tried to speak at the service, nothing came. Throat closed like a fist. Doc says it's shock. I say it's fitting. My voice couldn't save them. Why should it work now? The entries became sporadic after that. Months of silence documented in broken phrases, moving to Dead Mare Ridge where no one knew his story. Building the ranch like a penance, living half a life because the better half was gone. But one entry stood out, dated just a week ago. September 3rd, 1871. A girl came today, cast out, pregnant, barefoot. Like M when her father threw her out for choosing me. But this one has M's eyes, M's chin. God help me, she could be M's ghost. I know who she is. M showed me a tintype once. Her twin sister who stayed home, stayed safe. This is that woman's daughter. This is family. Still can't speak, but maybe I can help. Maybe saving her is how I apologize to M for failing. Maybe this is why I survived. When I shouldn't have. To be here when M's blood needed shelter. The circle closes strange ways. Grace closed the journal, her tears falling on her newborn daughter. Maribel was my aunt. You were my uncle by marriage. We're family. Josiah nodded, then pointed to the baby with a question in his eyes. Grace, she said. I named her Grace for the kindness of strangers who turn out to be family, for second chances. She paused. For you, who showed me grace when everyone else showed judgment. Something shifted in Josiah's face. He opened his mouth, struggled, then forced out another word, Maribel. Oh, you want me to name her Maribel Grace? He shook his head, pointed to Grace herself. I look like her. A nod, then he touched his chest, right over his heart. The gesture broke Grace's composure completely. She sobbed, for her aunt who'd died, happy but too young, for the man who'd carried that grief in silence for 6 years, for herself cast out and alone, for the strange ways family finds family. When her tears finally stopped, Josiah had moved to the stove, preparing food with steady hands. The journal lay between them, truth finally spoken, if not in voice, then in ink. Grace understood now why he'd helped her without question. She was Maribel's echo, carrying forward the family line that had been cut short. Her daughter, their daughter in a way, was redemption for old losses. "Uncle Josiah," she said softly, trying out the words. "That's what you are. What you've always been, even before we knew." He turned, and for the first time in days, something like a smile touched his features. Small, sad, but real. The baby fussed, and Grace lifted her to nurse. 3 broken people in a small ranch house, bound by blood and loss and the strange mercy of fate. Not the family any of them had planned, but family nonetheless. Word traveled fast in a town like Deadmere Ridge. The silent cowboy had taken in the cast-out girl. She'd given birth. He'd been seen in town buying baby supplies, spending money. He usually hoarded like a miser. The gossip reached Samuel Holloway at his ranch 10 miles south. His face darkened with each detail. Bad enough his daughter had shamed the family. Now she was living with a man, unmarried, compounding her sin. "I'll not have it," he declared to his wife. "No daughter of mine will play whore to a broken-down soldier." "Samuel, please," Martha Holloway begged. "She's our child." "She's no child of mine, but I'll not have our name dragged further through the mud." He strapped on his gun. "I'll fetch her back, put her somewhere she can't shame us more. A convent, maybe, or an asylum." He rode out with his 2 sons, faces set in righteous anger. Martha watched them go, her heart breaking for the daughter she'd been too weak to defend. They arrived at Josiah's ranch as the sun reached its peak. Grace was in the garden, baby Maribel in a sling across her chest, picking late vegetables. She looked up at the sound of horses, and her blood ran cold. "Papa, don't call me that." Samuel dismounted, his sons flanking him. "You're coming with us now." "No." The simple word hung between them. Samuel's face reddened. "You don't tell me no, girl. You lost that right when you spread your legs for whatever smooth talker filled your belly." "I'm not going anywhere." Grace lifted her chin, finding strength she didn't know she had. "This is my home now." "Home? Living in sin with a man old enough to be your father? You think that makes it better?" "He's family." The words came out before Grace could stop them. "Uncle Josiah, Aunt Maribel's husband." Samuel's mouth worked soundlessly. Everyone knew the story of Maribel. The twin who'd run off with a soldier, died somewhere far from home. It was the family's great shame, whispered about but never acknowledged. "Lies," he finally spat. "Maribel's dead. Has been for years." "Yes, killed by Comancheros along with her baby. Uncle Josiah's been mourning them in silence ever since." Grace stepped forward, protective of the man who'd protected her. "He took me in because I'm family, because he's a good man, better than—" The slap came hard and fast, knocking Grace sideways. The baby wailed, but before Samuel could strike again, a hand caught his wrist. Josiah stood there, materialized. Like smoke, his grip iron strong. For the first time in 6 years, rage blazed in those winter sky eyes. "Don't." The word came out rusty, broken, but unmistakable. "Touch her again." Everyone froze. The silent cowboy had spoken. 3 words, but they carried the weight of mountains. Samuel tried to pull free, couldn't. "Let go of me, you broken down—" "No." Josiah's voice grew stronger with each word, like a creek finding its course after drought. "You don't hit women, not. Your daughter, not. Anyone. She's no daughter of mine. Then she's mine." Josiah released Samuel's wrist, stepped between him and Grace. "My niece, my family, my protection." The words came easier now, dam broken, flood released. "You threw her away like trash, but she's treasure, her baby treasure. You're the trash for not seeing." Samuel's sons shifted nervously. They'd never seen their father challenged, never heard the silent cowboy speak. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. "You want her?" Samuel snarled. "Fine, keep the whore and her bastard, but know this, she's dead to us. No daughter, no sister, no family. Dead." "Good." Josiah's voice was steady now. "Better. Dead to you than dead from you." The threat implicit in those words backed Samuel up a step. He'd beaten his wife, his children ruled through fear. But Josiah had survived war, survived loss that would have killed most men. He wouldn't be intimidated. "Come on, boys." Samuel mounted his horse. "We're done here." As they rode away, Josiah's legs gave out. He sat hard in the dirt, shaking. 6 years of silence broken, and the words wouldn't stop coming. Sorry, couldn't, save, Maribel, couldn't, speak, couldn't, but you, saved, you, Grace, baby, safe, promise, safe. Grace knelt beside him, baby Maribel between them, and wrapped her arms around this broken man who'd stood tall when it mattered. "We're all safe now, all 3 of us. Family." He nodded, tears streaming. "Family. Yes, family." News of the confrontation spread through Dead Mare Ridge like wildfire. The silent cowboy had spoken not just words but sentences, paragraphs, torrents of protective rage. And the reason was even more shocking. Grace Holloway was his niece, family of the mysterious Maribel who'd run away so many years ago. The town's judgment began to shift. If Josiah Teller, respected despite his silence, claimed her as family, if her own father had struck her while she held a baby, if the story of shelter was kinship rather than sin. Pastor Williams felt the change in his congregation that Sunday. The whispers were different now, sympathetic rather than scandalized. He'd prepared a sermon on the wages of sin, but looking out at the faces, he knew it would fall on deaf ears. More importantly, his own heart had been pricked. The image of Josiah standing between a young mother and violence, speaking for the first time in 6 years to defend her, wouldn't leave his mind. After the service, he made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. He rode out to Josiah's ranch. Grace answered the door, baby Maribel in her arms. Her face showed surprise but not fear. Behind her, Josiah appeared, protective as always. "Mr. Teller, Miss Holloway." The pastor removed his hat. "I've come to apologize." They waited, Grace wary, Josiah watchful. "I failed you, Miss Holloway. When you needed sanctuary, I offered judgment. When you needed compassion, I gave condemnation." He twisted his hat in his hands. "I've been reading scripture wrong. Christ ate with sinners, sheltered the condemned. I'd like to do better. She's not a sinner." Josiah's voice was stronger now, words coming easier with practice. "She's a young woman who trusted wrong man. Baby's not sin, baby's blessing." "You're right." Williams looked at the infant, sleeping peacefully. "Every child is a blessing." "I'm sorry, I forgot that." Grace studied him, this man who'd crossed the street to avoid her. "What do you want, Pastor?" "To make amends. To welcome you properly to our community. He swallowed hard. "To baptize your daughter, if you'll allow it, publicly, so everyone knows she's welcomed in God's house." The offer hung in the air. A public baptism would be a statement, the church accepting what the town had rejected. It would give baby Maribel something Grace had lost, a place in the community from birth. "Why?" Grace asked. "Why now?" "Because I saw courage." Williams looked at Josiah. "You stood against violence, broke 6 years of silence to protect family. If you can change, maybe I can too. Maybe we all can." Josiah and Grace exchanged glances. Trust came hard after betrayal, but second chances were precious things, not to be rejected lightly. "Next Sunday?" Grace asked tentatively. "Next Sunday, and Miss Holloway, you'll sit in the front pew, both of you, as families should." After he left, Grace turned to Josiah. "Do you trust him?" "Trust? No. But forgiveness? Maybe. Town needs to see baby, welcomed, needs to learn." That week, more visitors came. Mrs. Baker from the general store bringing cloth for baby clothes, the blacksmith's wife with preserves and apologies, even Sheriff Baker, shamefaced, offering awkward congratulations. The baptism drew the whole town. Grace walked down the aisle in a borrowed dress, head high, Josiah beside her in his best clothes. Baby Maribel wore the christening gown Mrs. Baker had sewn, white as forgiveness, soft as mercy. "Who stands for this child?" Pastor Williams asked. "I do." Josiah's voice rang clear. Her great-uncle, her protector, her family. As William sprinkled water on Maribel's head, blessing her in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, something shifted in Dead Mare Ridge. The town that had cast out a pregnant girl was welcoming a baby. The people who'd whispered condemnation were speaking acceptance. Not all, some hearts stayed hard. But enough. Enough to make a difference. Enough to give Maribel Grace Teller, for Josiah had given his name as well as his protection, a chance at belonging. After the service, the congregation lingered, many approaching to coo over the baby or offer Grace tentative smiles. She stood tall, no longer the cast-out girl, but a mother, a niece, a member of the community. And Josiah. He spoke to everyone who approached, words flowing easier each time. 6 years of stored-up conversation poured out, nothing profound, just the ordinary exchanges that make up a life, weather and crops, horses and hopes. It's good to hear your voice again, Josiah, old Mrs. Palmer said. Maribel would be so proud. She is. He looked at Grace and the baby. Somehow, she is. Fall turned to winter, and the strange family at the Teller Ranch settled into rhythms of their own making. Josiah's voice grew stronger with use, though he'd never be chatty. Grace proved herself capable beyond her years, turning the neglected house into a home. Baby Maribel thrived, growing round and rosy, her cries the sweetest sound the ranch had heard in years. The transformation went beyond the personal. With Grace's help, Josiah began working the ranch properly again. She had a head for figures. All those years helping her father with accounts before he'd cast her out, and soon had their finances organized. We need to buy more cattle, she announced one evening, going over the ledgers, and fix the well before spring. Maybe take on a hand for the heavy work. Can't afford hand. Josiah's speech was clearer now, gaps between words shrinking. We can if we sell those horses you've been training. They're worth good money, and you've got a gift with them. It was true. Even in his silent years, Josiah had trained horses, with patient skill. Word spread, and soon buyers were coming from neighboring towns. The ranch that had been dying began to live again. One buyer surprised them both, Thomas Reed, the smooth-talking merchant who'd fathered Grace's child and fled when she'd told him. He sat on his expensive horse, face cycling through shock at seeing Grace here, healthy and clearly thriving. His eyes fixed on the baby in her arms. Grace? What are you... Is that... Mr. Reed? Her voice was steady as winter ice. You here? For a horse or just to gawk? I heard Teller had good stock. I didn't know you were... He swallowed. The baby. Is it... She, not it. Josiah stepped beside Grace, solid as a wall. She is Maribel Grace Teller, my grandniece, my heir, no concern of yours. Thomas's face went through several expressions. Relief at being off the hook, shame at that relief, confusion at the family connection. I thought in town they said... Town says lots, Josiah continued. Not all true. You want horse or not? Yes. The bay mare. They completed the transaction in tense silence. As Thomas prepared to leave, he paused. Grace, I'm sorry, I should have... Yes, you should have. Grace's chin lifted, but you didn't, and now I'm glad. Maribel deserves better than a father who runs from responsibility. I could provide money for the child. We don't need your money. Grace shifted Maribel to her other hip. We have everything we need. Family, home, honor, things you can't buy. Thomas left, shoulders hunched. Grace watched him go, feeling the last chain of her old life break. She'd loved him once, or thought she had. Now she saw him clear. Weak, selfish, everything Josiah wasn't. You okay? Josiah asked. Better than... Okay, free. She smiled. He thought he ruined me. Instead, he led me to family I never knew I had. To you. That evening, as snow began to fall, they sat by the fire planning the ranch's future. With the horse money, they could indeed hire help. Young Jake Morrison from town needed work, had a good reputation. The well could be fixed, new cattle purchased. Building something, Josiah said, watching Maribel sleep in her cradle. Maribel wanted to build a legacy, ranch to pass down, children to pass it to. Now we can. Different than she imagined, but still good. Better, maybe. You're stronger than she was. Tougher. Ranch life broke her some. Made her sad when I was gone. He stared into the fire. Should have seen, should have stayed. You couldn't have known. And she wasn't broken. She was happy. Her letters to my mother said so. Happy with you, with baby James, with the life you were building. Grace touched his hand. The Comancheros broke everything, not you. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when words have been said and understood. Outside, snow covered the ground like forgiveness, making everything clean and new. Thank you, Grace said suddenly, for taking me in, for standing up to my father, for giving Maribel a name and a place. Thank you, he responded, for giving me voice again, for being family, for letting me try again. We saved each other. Yes, we did. The fire crackled, the baby stirred, and the snow continued to fall. In the morning, they'd start the work of building something larger than themselves, but tonight they were just family, safe and warm and together. Spring arrived with unusual warmth that year, melting snow and hearts alike. The ranch buzzed with activity. Jake Morrison had proved a godsend, working hard and asking few questions. The new cattle grew fat on good grass. Baby Maribel took her first tottering steps between Grace and Josiah, laughing at her own cleverness. Then the letter came. Grace found it in town when she went for supplies, waiting at the post office. The return address made her hands tremble. Martha Holloway, Silver Falls. Her mother writing after nearly 2 years of silence. She opened it in the wagon, unable to wait. My dearest Grace, I pray this finds you well. I've carried such guilt over how I failed you. A mother should protect her children, not stand silent while they're cast out. Your father is dead. His heart gave out last month. I know I shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but I feel only relief. The house is peaceful now in ways it never was. Your brothers miss you terribly. They ask about their sister, and I've told them the truth, that you're alive, that you have a daughter, that you're with family. They want to meet their niece, but that's not why I'm writing. I'm writing because I finally went through your grandmother's things. She passed last winter, as you may not have heard. In her papers, I found something that changes everything. Maribel didn't run away. She was sent away. Father discovered she was pregnant, beat her nearly to death. Grandmother helped. Her escape gave her money, told her to find her soldier boy and never come back. All these years we thought she abandoned us, but we abandoned her first. There's more. Grandmother stayed in touch, letters hidden in her Bible. Maribel was happy, Grace, so happy with her Josiah and baby James. She forgave us, even though we didn't deserve it. The last letter came a month before she died. She invited Grandmother to visit to meet her grandson. Grandmother was planning the trip when word came of the Comanchero raid. I've enclosed her letters. I thought Josiah should have them. And Grace, I'm so sorry for everything. If you can forgive a coward mother, I'd like to know my granddaughter. Your brothers and I could come visit if you'll have us. All my love. Mother Grace sat in the wagon, tears streaming, as the truth rearranged everything she'd believed about her family. Maribel hadn't been the wild twin who'd brought shame. She'd been a young woman in love, brutalized by her father, saved by her grandmother, just like Grace herself. She found Josiah in the barn, mending tack. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter and the packet that had come with it. He read slowly, his face cycling through emotions too complex for naming. The letters from Maribel to her grandmother painted a picture of deep happiness. She wrote of Josiah's kindness, his humor, his dedication to making her happy, of baby James's first smile, first tooth, first word. Papa, of course. Of the little house by the creek, the garden she was planting, the dreams they shared. He's nothing. Like father, one letter read. He's never raised his hand to me, never even raised his voice. He says I'm precious, that James and I are his whole world. I believe him, grandmother. I finally understand what love should be. Josiah broke down completely, sobbing for the wife who'd loved him so thoroughly, for the son he'd never seen grow, for the life stolen by violence. Grace held him as he grieved, her own tears mixing with his. She was happy, he managed finally. I always worried that she regretted choosing me. Never, not for a moment. Grace wiped his cheeks. She loved you completely, just like you loved her. They sat in the barn, surrounded by the everyday tools of ranch life, reading voices from the past. Maribel emerged fully formed from these letters, funny, determined, deeply in love with her little family. Your mother, Josiah said eventually. She wants to visit? If we'll have them. But Josiah, if it's too much, too many memories. No, he stood, decision made. Maribel would want her sister to know the truth, would want families reconciled. Yes, they come. That evening, Grace wrote back, invitation extended. As she sealed the letter, baby Maribel toddled over, reaching up to be held. You'll have more family soon, Grace told her. Grandmother, uncles, people who'll love you. Family, Maribel said one of her few words. Good. Yes, sweet girl, family is good. Martha Holloway arrived on a dusty afternoon in May, accompanied by Grace's brothers, Samuel Jr., now 17, and Michael, 15. They climbed down from the hired wagon nervously, unsure of their welcome despite the invitation. Grace stood on the porch, Maribel on her hip, Josiah beside her. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Michael broke ranks, running forward to embrace his sister. We missed you so much, he said, voice muffled against her shoulder. It wasn't right what Pa did. We knew it wasn't right. Samuel Jr. followed more slowly, almost shyly. He'd been his father's enforcer once, but that boy was gone. In his place stood a young man who'd learned hard truths about the father he'd idolized. Martha approached last, tears already falling. My baby, my dear, brave girl, can you forgive? There's nothing to forgive, Grace interrupted. You were scared. We all were scared of him. I should have been stronger. Should have protected. You, like my grandmother, protected Maribel. Martha turned to Josiah. And you, my sister's husband, the man who saved my daughter when I couldn't. Josiah, still uncomfortable with too many words, simply opened his arms. Martha fell into them, sobbing for her lost sister, for years of lies, for the family connections broken by one man's cruelty. Baby Maribel, fascinated by all these new people, reached for her grandmother. Martha took her with trembling hands, marveling at this granddaughter she'd thought she'd never meet. She looks like you, she told Grace, but oh, she has Maribel's smile, that same mischievous spark. They moved inside where Grace had prepared dinner. The table that had held two for so long now overflowed with family. Stories poured out, years of catching up compressed into hours. Samuel Jr. spoke of how their father's death had freed them. We're selling the ranch. Too many bad memories. Thought maybe we could buy land nearby. Start fresh. You'd move here? Grace couldn't hide her hope. If you'll have us, Martha said, I want to know my granddaughter. Want my sister's husband to know he has family beyond the one he's built. Want us all to be what we should have been from the start. The Baxter place is for sale, Josiah offered. Good land, fair price, 3 miles north. And so it was decided. The Holloway money, built on Samuel Sr.'s cruelty but clean in his widow's hands, would buy new beginnings. A ranch where Martha and the boys could start over, close enough for Sunday dinners and shared work, far enough for healthy independence. That night, after her family had gone to the hotel in town, Grace found Josiah on the porch, looking at the stars. You okay? She asked. That was a lot. Good lot. Maribel would be so happy. Her sister here, families together. He smiled. We did it, Grace, built what they couldn't. We did. Different than anyone planned, but good. Tell me, he said suddenly, about the father, Maribel's father. Never understood how a man could hurt his daughters that way. Grace sat beside him, gathering thoughts. He was broken himself, I think. His father beat him, so he beat us. Thought strength meant fear, love meant control. He couldn't stand that Maribel chose her own path, loved someone he didn't pick. And you chose too. I thought I did. Thomas seemed so different from Pa. Gentle, educated, full of pretty words. She laughed bitterly. Turns out there's more than one way to be cruel. Pa hit with fists, Thomas hit with absence. They're lost, Josiah said firmly. Both stupid men. Lost treasures because they couldn't see value. They sat quietly, listening to the night sounds. Inside, baby Maribel slept peacefully, unaware that her world had expanded to include grandmother and uncles who'd love her properly. We're breaking the cycle, Grace said. Maribel will never know a raised hand, never doubt her worth. She'll grow up surrounded by love, able to choose her own path. Yes, we break it. Here, now, forever. The stars wheeled overhead, witness to promises made and kept. Tomorrow would bring more work, helping Martha and the boys settle in, building new family rhythms. But tonight, there was just peace and the knowledge that sometimes cast-out people find their way to exactly where they belong. 2 years passed in a blur of growth and joy. The Teller Ranch and the newly established Holloway Ranch worked in partnership, sharing labor and profits. Martha proved herself a capable manager, while the boys threw themselves into ranch work with enthusiasm born of freedom. Maribel, now 3, ruled both households with charm and determination. She had Josiah wrapped around her tiny finger, the stern man melting at her smallest request. Her first sentence had been, "Uncle Joe, up please," and he'd lifted her onto his shoulders, where she perched like a queen surveying her domain. The town had fully embraced them now. Grace served on the church committee for helping struggling families. Who better to understand their needs? Josiah had found his place too, his horse training business bringing prosperity and respect. It was at the town's harvest festival that everything shifted again. Grace was helping serve food when she noticed a new face, a man about Josiah's age wearing the collar of a traveling preacher, but with the bearing of someone who'd seen harder times. He watched the crowd with careful eyes, pausing when he spotted Josiah. "Excuse me," he approached Grace. "That man there, is his name Teller?" "Josiah Teller." "Yes, he's my uncle." Grace studied him warily. "Why?" I knew him. In the war. We served together." The man removed his hat. "Name's Daniel Cooper. Chaplain Cooper now. But back then, I was just Private Cooper. Scared kid. From Ohio." Grace called Josiah over. The recognition was immediate. Josiah's face lit up in a way she'd rarely seen. "Cooper? Danny Cooper? Thought you died at Antietam." "Nearly did. Would have if you hadn't dragged me off that field." Cooper gripped Josiah's hand. "Been looking for you ever since. Heard about a silent horseman in these parts. Had to see if it was you." They talked for hours. War memories mixed with present lives. Cooper had found God in a field hospital, devoted his life to ministry. "Couldn't make sense of the killing any other way," he explained. As the evening progressed, Cooper shared his current mission. "I travel the territories, ministering to folks who can't get to regular churches. Lot of hurting people out here, especially women and children. Been thinking of settling somewhere, starting a proper mission." Grace and Josiah exchanged glances. The same thought occurred to both. "Deadmare Ridge could use a mission," Grace said carefully. "We've been informal about helping folks, but someone with training and experience with broken people," Josiah added. "Man who's seen war understands different kinds of wounds." Cooper's eyes sharpened. "You offering?" "Maybe. Town's growing. Railroad's coming through next year. Going to be more people, more need." Josiah gestured around the festival. "Good people here mostly, but good people need guidance too." "I've got some money saved," Cooper admitted, "and the mission board's been pushing me to establish somewhere permanent. But I'd need help, building, organizing, understanding the local needs." "Grace is good at organizing," Josiah said proudly. "Turned my ranch from dying to thriving, her mother too, Martha Holloway. Between them they could organize heaven itself." And so another piece fell into place. Cooper stayed, initially as a guest at the Teller Ranch while he scouted locations for his mission. He fit naturally into their extended family, another broken person making good. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Cooper, Josiah, Grace, Martha, the boys, and little Maribel, Grace marveled at how far they'd come. From cast-out girl and silent cowboy to this, a family of choice, bound by shared understanding and mutual support. God works strange ways, Cooper observed, bouncing Maribel on his knee. Josiah saves my life in war. Years later, I find him here, building the kind of community I want to serve. Feels like purpose. Everything led here, Martha agreed. Maribel's casting out led to her happiness with Josiah. Grace's casting out led her to him. My husband's death freed us to find you all. Even the war, terrible as it was, created bonds that brought Cooper here. From ashes, new growth, Josiah said. Like Grace's garden, plant seeds in burned ground. They grow stronger. Maribel, tired of adult talk, demanded a story. Josiah obliged, telling her about her namesake, the first Maribel who'd been brave enough to choose love over safety, who'd written letters full of joy, who'd planted roses. That never got to bloom. But you bloomed, he told the little girl. You're her roses, growing strong and beautiful, making the world better, just by being. The Dead Mare Ridge mission opened its doors 6 months later, built with community, effort and funded by surprising generosity. Cooper had expected resistance. Missions often faced suspicion. But Grace and Josiah's endorsement carried weight. They took me in when everyone else cast me out, Grace told doubters. Now we're paying it forward. That's what Christians are. Supposed to do, isn't it? The mission served multiple purposes: shelter for travelers, sanctuary for women fleeing bad situations, education for children whose families couldn't afford school. Cooper ministered to all, regardless of denomination or background. Jesus didn't ask for membership cards. They. Neither do we. Grace managed the books and organized the women's programs. Her own experience made her perfect for counseling young women who'd fallen. She understood shame and redemption both. One such woman arrived on a cold November night. Sarah Banks, 16 and pregnant, thrown out by her employer when her condition became obvious. She sat in Grace's office, terrified and defiant by turns. They all think I'm ruined, Sarah said. Maybe I am. I thought I was ruined too, Grace replied. 3 years ago, I stood where you're standing. Pregnant, abandoned, sure my life was over. You know what I learned? Sarah shook her head. Ruined is just another word for ready to rebuild. Every broken thing can be mended, just maybe not the way it was before, Grace smiled. Sometimes the mending makes it stronger. She told Sarah her story, the casting out, finding Josiah, discovering family in unexpected places. My daughter wasn't a mistake or a shame. She was the key that unlocked everything good in my life. Sarah stayed at the mission through her pregnancy, helping with daily tasks, learning skills she'd need. When her son was born, with Grace attending, having learned midwifery from experience and study, the community welcomed him without judgment. We're changing things, Cooper told Josiah one day, watching children play in the mission courtyard. One rescued soul at a time. Grace changed things, Josiah corrected. Rest of us just followed her lead. It was true in ways. Grace's courage in facing down shame had inspired others. Martha spoke openly now about surviving her husband's abuse. The boys talked to other young men about breaking cycles of violence. Even Josiah shared his story more freely. The pain of loss, the prison of silence, the redemption of reaching out. The mission became a beacon. Women traveled from neighboring towns seeking help. Families broken by drink or violence found counseling. Children who'd never held books learned to read. And always at the center was the strange family that had started it all. Grace, once cast out, now pillar of the community. Josiah, once silent, now speaking hope to the hopeless. Maribel, the child born of shame, growing up surrounded by love and acceptance. One Sunday, as Cooper preached about transformation, he asked Grace to share her testimony. She stood before the packed mission, no longer the frightened girl who'd arrived barefoot and desperate. 4 years ago, my father said I wasn't his daughter anymore. He was wrong. I was always his daughter. He just couldn't see past his pride. To love me. She looked at Josiah, at her mother, at her daughter playing with the other children. But God put me where I needed to be, with family I didn't know I had, with people who saw possibility where others saw only shame. The word cast out implies something thrown away, but sometimes being cast out is really being set free, free to find where you really belong, free to become who you're meant to be. She smiled. I was cast out in disgrace. I was found in grace. And now we try to find others to show them the same mercy that saved us. The congregation, former slaves and former masters, reformed drunks and proper ladies, all united in their need for grace, responded with Amen that shook the rafters. After the service, Sarah Banks approached Grace. I've decided. I want to help. Want to be for other girls what you've been for me. And so the circle widened. Each saved soul became a saver. Each found person became a finder. The mission grew not just in size but in purpose, rippling out like water from a stone. Not everyone approved of the mission's work. Some saw it as enabling sin, harboring undesirables. The criticism came to a head when Marcus Thornton, wealthy rancher and town council member, demanded action. You're bringing trash into our town, he declared at a council meeting. Fallen women, they're bastards, drifters, and worse. It's got to stop. Grace stood to respond, but Josiah beat her to it. Define trash, Mr. Thornton. You know what I mean, Teller. Undesirable elements. Like cast-out pregnant girls? Josiah's voice was steel. Like soldiers broken by war, like women fleeing. Violent husbands, that kind of trash? They made their choices, did they? Grace interjected. Did Sarah Banks choose to be raped by her employer? Did Mrs. Coleman choose to be beaten by her husband? Did the Mitchell children choose to be orphaned? That's different. No, it's not. Cooper stood now, too. Every person the mission helps is someone's daughter, son, sister, brother. Everyone bears God's image, deserves God's mercy. The meeting grew heated. Thornton had supporters, those who valued property over people, reputation over righteousness. But more stood with the mission. Business owners who'd hired mission graduates, families who'd been helped through crisis, even some who'd simply seen the town grow kinder. Sheriff Baker, the same man who'd spat when Grace first arrived, stood slowly. 4 years ago, I watched this town turn its back on a pregnant girl, watched her own father cast her out. Thought it was right then. She'd sinned, deserved consequences. He looked at Grace. I was wrong. That girl became one of our finest citizens. Her bastard child brightens every room she enters. If we'd had our way, they'd have died in the desert. Instead, they lived and made us all better. The mission stays, Mayor Collins declared after the vote. Deadmere Ridge stands for second chances. Anyone doesn't like it can find another town. Thornton stormed out, but his defeat marked a turning point. The mission wasn't just tolerated now, it was embraced as essential to the town's identity. That victory was tested months later, when Thornton returned with a challenge. His daughter Patricia, pride of his life, had been seen entering the mission at night. He accused Cooper and Grace of corrupting her, demanded investigation. The truth was simpler and sadder. Patricia, beneath her perfect exterior, was being courted by a man who hit her when she disagreed with him. She'd come seeking advice, too ashamed to admit her fear to anyone else. My father would kill me if he knew, she'd told Grace. He's arranged this match, sees dollar signs, but I'm scared. Grace had counseled her, given her options, promised support whatever she chose. When the story came out, Patricia finally finding courage to speak, Thornton faced a choice, his pride or his daughter. To everyone's surprise, he chose his daughter. Faced with Grace's quiet dignity, Patricia's tears, and the evidence of his potential son-in-law's violence, something in Thornton cracked. I didn't know, he said brokenly. She always smiled, always seemed happy. We're good at hiding pain, Grace said gently, especially when we think no one will believe us or help us. That's why the mission matters. It's a place where hiding isn't necessary. Thornton became an unlikely ally after that, his wealth supporting mission programs. Patricia, freed from her engagement, began volunteering, teaching younger girls to recognize warning signs she'd missed. Conversion by crisis, Cooper called it. Sometimes people don't change until the problem comes home. Through it all, little Maribel grew, absorbing lessons of compassion and courage. At 4, she was already helping serve meals, her small hands carrying bread to hungry visitors. She didn't see fallen women or bastard children. She saw friends, family, community. "Why do some people call them bad names?" she asked Grace one evening. "Because sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. Or they think being mean makes them better. But you know what? What, Mama? Love is always stronger than meanness, always. It just sometimes takes longer to win." 5 years had passed since Grace had stood in the dust, cast out and alone. Now, on a similar summer morning, she stood in the same spot, but everything had changed. The general store that had slammed its door now bore a sign, "All welcome, credit available for mission families." The church that had turned away now hosted mission programs. The sheriff who'd spat now brought troubled youth to Cooper for counseling. Grace wasn't alone either. Josiah stood beside her, as he had since that first day. Maribel, now 5 and starting school, held her hand. Cooper was there, Sarah Banks, now the mission's assistant director, the Holloway family, and dozens of others whose lives had intertwined through years of shared service. They were dedicating a new building, the Maribel Teller Memorial Hall, named for Josiah's first wife. It would house expanded mission services, a proper medical clinic, classrooms, workshop spaces where women could learn trades. She would have loved this, Josiah said, his voice steady now with years of use. Maribel always wanted to help people, said we were blessed to be blessings. She was, Grace agreed, through you. Through all of this, the dedication drew visitors from across the territory, other towns wanting to start similar missions, women who'd been helped and gone on to help others. Even Thomas Reed attended, humbled and seeking to make amends. He approached Grace nervously. "I know I have no right to ask, but might I meet her? Maribel. Not as a father, I forfeited that. Just to see who she's become." Grace studied him. 5 years had aged him, but more than that, seemed to have taught him something about consequences. "That's her choice," she said finally. "Maribel, this is Mr. Reed. He knew Mama before you were born." Maribel, secure in who she was, smiled at him. "Hello, Mr. Reed. Are you here to help with the mission?" Yes, if they'll have me. I've wasted years running from responsibility. Thought maybe it's time to face it." "Good," Maribel declared with 5-year-old certainty. "Uncle Joe says helping people helps us too. Makes our hearts bigger." Thomas's eyes filled. This poised, confident child, so different from what might have been if he'd claimed her in shame and resentment. Grace had given her what he couldn't, unconditional love and acceptance. "Thank you," he told Grace quietly, "for raising her right, for being the parent I couldn't be." "We all do what we can," Grace replied. "Your leaving led me to Josiah, to family, to purpose. Maybe now you'll find yours." The ceremony continued with speeches, songs, and testimonies. Woman after woman stood to share how the mission had saved them. Men spoke of learning to be better fathers and husbands. Children performed a play about kindness defeating judgment. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of redemption, Pastor Williams, aged but still preaching, offered a benediction. "Lord, we thank you for second chances, for cast out people who become cornerstones, for silent voices that find their words, for shame transformed into purpose. Bless this place and all who enter it. May they find what grace found, that being cast out is sometimes being set free. Amen." The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctant to end the celebration. Grace found herself back where it all began, looking at the spot where she'd collapsed in despair. "Full circle," Josiah observed. "No," Grace corrected. "Spirals. We come back to the same places but higher up, seeing more, understanding better." "Mama?" Maribel tugged her skirt. "Can we go home? Uncle Cooper promised to tell the story about the warrior princess again." "That's you," Grace told her. "You're the warrior princess." "I know," Maribel said matter-of-factly, "but I like hearing it anyway." They walked home together, the cast-out girl, the silent cowboy, and the child who should have been shame, but became joy. Behind them, the mission stood ready for whoever would come next, needing shelter, mercy, a second chance at being human. The circle would continue, spiraling ever outward, each saved soul saving others, each found person finding more. And at the center always, the truth Grace had learned in her darkest hour. Sometimes being cast out is the first step toward coming home. 10 years after Grace's arrival, Dead Mare Ridge had transformed into something unprecedented. A frontier town known not for violence or vice, but for compassion. The mission model had spread to 6 other towns, each adapting the principles to local needs. Grace, now 30 and confident in her calling, traveled between locations, training new directors. Her story had become legend, told and retold to show that no one was beyond redemption. But she always returned home to the ranch where it all began. Josiah, silver threading his hair, had become the territory's most sought-after horse trainer. But his real pride was in the young men he mentored, boys without fathers who needed to learn that strength didn't require violence. His silence, once a prison, had become a teaching tool. Sometimes you need to be quiet to hear what's really being said, he'd tell them. I was quiet too long, but now I know. Words have power. Use them wisely. Maribel, 15 and brilliant, was the joy of both their lives. She'd inherited Grace's determination and Josiah's way with animals, but her gift was uniquely her own, the ability to see past surfaces to the heart beneath. I want to be a doctor, she announced at dinner one evening. Like the one who couldn't. Save Uncle Joe's first family, but I'll learn better medicine. Save the ones who couldn't be saved before. That's a big dream, Grace said. You had big dreams too. Cast-out girl becoming a mission director. That seemed impossible once. Maribel grinned. Besides, Uncle Cooper says God specializes in impossible things. That he does, Cooper agreed. He'd aged well, his ministry flourishing. The war broken. Chaplin had found his purpose in healing other broken people. Speaking of impossible, I have news. They turned to him expectantly. The Territorial Medical College is starting a scholarship program for promising young women from frontier communities. Full funding, he smiled at Maribel. I may have mentioned your name to the board. Maribel squealed, very unlike her usual composed self. Really? They'd consider me. Consider you? Dear girl, when they heard your story, daughter of the mission, movement raised by people who rebuilt lives from ashes, they nearly begged me to ensure you'd apply. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. Her daughter, once destined for shame and poverty, now headed for medical school. The cast-out girl's child becoming a healer. There's more, Martha added. She'd been quiet during dinner, but now smiled mysteriously. The town council met yesterday. They want to rename Main Street. To what? Josiah asked. Grace Avenue, in honor of the woman who showed us grace when we showed her none. Grace shook her head. That's too much. I don't need... It's not about need, Samuel Jr. interrupted. He was a town councilman now, respected and fair. It's about remembering. Every person who walks that street will know that once we failed someone. And she turned that failure into our salvation. Vote was unanimous, Michael added. He ran the general store now, the same one that had closed its doors to Grace. Even Thornton voted yes. Said his Patricia wouldn't be alive without the mission's intervention. They sat in stunned silence. Then Maribel asked the question that mattered most. What would the first Maribel think? Uncle Joe's wife? Josiah considered. She'd laugh, say it was too fancy for simple folk like us. Then she'd cry happy tears and insist on planting roses along the whole street. Then that's what we'll do, Grace decided. White roses like she loved. Beauty from ashes, hope from heartbreak. The dedication happened a month later. The whole town turned out, plus visitors from every mission in the network. Grace stood where she'd once fallen, now speaking to hundreds, who'd gathered to honor her journey. 15 years ago, I stood here abandoned and afraid. My father had cast me out. The town had turned away. I thought my life was over. She paused, looking at the faces, many who'd been there that day, who'd participated in her shaming. But God had other plans. He led me to a silent cowboy who was my uncle by marriage. to a family I never knew existed, to a purpose born from pain. She smiled. I won't lie and say I'm grateful for the casting out. It hurt then, and the memory hurts now, but I'm grateful for what came after. She gestured to the mission, to the renamed street, to the people gathered. Every person here has a story of falling and rising, of shame transformed to purpose. That's our legacy. Not perfection, but redemption. Not sinlessness, but grace. As she spoke, workers planted the first white roses along the newly christened Grace Avenue. By spring, they'd bloom impossibly in the desert, just like hope in desperate hearts. 5 more years passed. Maribel excelled at medical school, her letters home full of knowledge she couldn't wait to apply. Grace's work expanded, beyond anyone's dreams. A network of missions across 3 territories, thousands of lives touched and changed. But it was the unexpected visitor who brought the story full circle. Grace was in her office at the mission when Sarah Banks announced, "There's a girl here, won't give her name, says she needs to see the woman who runs this place." Grace found her in the chapel, young, maybe 16, obviously pregnant, with the same desperate dignity Grace remembered wearing 20 years ago. But it was her face that stopped Grace cold. The girl looked exactly like Grace had at that age. "Can I help you?" Grace asked gently. The girl looked up with familiar green eyes. "Are you Grace Teller, the one who was cast out?" "I was Grace Holloway then, but yes, my name is Hope. Hope Reed." The girl's chin lifted defiantly. "Thomas Reed was my father." Grace sank into the pew beside her. Thomas had left town after the dedication, saying he needed to make amends elsewhere. She'd heard he'd married, started fresh. Now his daughter sat here in the same condition Grace had been in. "He's dead," Hope continued. "Died last year. But he told me about you, about my half-sister Maribel. Said if I ever needed help, real help, to find you." "What happened?" The story was depressingly familiar. A smooth-talking man, promises of marriage, abandonment when pregnancy couldn't be hidden. Hope's stepmother had cast her out, calling her a whore like her father. She said bad blood will tell, Hope whispered. That I'm just like him, spreading shame wherever I go. "No." Grace's voice was firm. "You're not your father any more than Maribel is. You're your own person, making your own choices. And right. Now you're choosing to seek help instead of despair. That's strength, not shame. But I've ruined everything. I thought that too. 20 years. Ergo, I stood where you're standing. Pregnant, abandoned, sure my life was over. You know what I learned?" Hope shook her head. "Ruined is just the beginning of rebuilt. Every broken thing can be mended. Sometimes the breaking is what lets the light in." Grace took the girl's hand. "Your father ran from responsibility. You're facing yours. That already makes you stronger than he was." Hope began to cry. Not the desperate tears of the hopeless, but the cleansing tears of someone finding safety after too long in danger. "Will you help me? I have nowhere else. You have here, you have us. And if you want, you have a sister who'll be thrilled to meet you." Grace smiled. "Maribel's coming home next month. Graduate doctor, ready to serve. She's been hoping to find more family." They settled Hope into the mission, the same room Sarah Banks had once occupied, that dozens of women had used as their first step toward new life. The cycle continued, but with each turn it grew stronger, wider, more full of grace. That night, Grace told Josiah about their new resident. "Thomas's girl," he mused, "come seeking what he couldn't give. Stability, acceptance, hope. She has his eyes but not his weakness. I think she'll do well here. Like mother, like daughter. Both of you, I mean." Josiah smiled. "Maribel will be pleased. She's always wanted a sister. They're nothing alike. Maribel raised in love. Hope in rejection. Makes them perfect for each other. One can teach confidence, the other resilience. Together, stronger than apart." It proved true. When Maribel returned, medical degree in hand, she embraced Hope immediately. "Sister, I've waited so long to say that word." Hope, overwhelmed by acceptance she'd never known, bloomed under the attention. She helped in the medical clinic Maribel established, learning skills that would support her and her child. The wedding took place on a perfect spring day, with white roses blooming impossibly everywhere. Maribel stood radiant in a dress Grace had sewn, preparing to marry Dr. William Chen, a fellow physician she'd met at medical school. "Nervous?" Grace asked, adjusting her daughter's veil. "No, yes, both," Maribel laughed. "Were you nervous when you married Uncle Joe?" Grace smiled, remembering. 5 years after she'd arrived, when Maribel was 10, Josiah had finally asked. Not a romantic proposal, that wasn't his way, just a simple, "Seems we should make this official. You willing?" She'd been more than willing. Their wedding had been small, family only, but perfect. A cast-out girl and a silent cowboy, choosing to make their found family official. "I was terrified," Grace admitted. "Not of marrying him, but of being happy. I'd gotten so used to shame and struggle, joy felt dangerous, but you chose it anyway." "Best choice I ever made, after choosing to keep you, of course." Maribel hugged her carefully, mindful of the dress. "I'm so glad you both chose, that you chose each other, chose me, chose to build all this." The ceremony was held at the Mission, Cooper officiating with tears streaming down his weathered face. The entire town attended. Grace Avenue shut down for the celebration. Hope served as maid of honor, her own baby, born healthy 2 months prior, sleeping in Martha's arms. "Do you, William, take Maribel to be your wife?" Cooper asked. "I do," William said clearly. He was a good man, kind and brilliant, who saw Maribel not as the cast-out girl's daughter, but as the remarkable woman she'd become. "Do you, Maribel Grace Teller, take William to be your husband?" "I do." Her voice rang with certainty. As they exchanged rings, Grace caught Josiah wiping his eyes. He'd walked Maribel down the aisle, given her away with pride and just a little reluctance. She was the daughter of his heart, proof that family was about choice more than blood. At the reception, held in the Memorial Hall, stories flowed like wine. Cooper told of finding Josiah after years of searching. Martha shared memories of both Maribels, the sister she'd lost and the granddaughter who carried her name forward. Even Thomas Reed's widow attended, having reconciled with Hope and seeking to understand the grace her stepdaughter had found. 23 years ago, Grace said in her toast, "I was cast out for the shame of pregnancy without marriage. Today, my daughter marries with the whole town's blessing. That's not just my journey, it's all of ours. From judgment to joy, from casting out to gathering in." She raised her glass. "To Maribel and William, may your love be as transformative as the love that built this place. May you always remember that the best families are chosen, the strongest foundations are grace, and the most beautiful gardens grow in the most unlikely ground." The celebration lasted long into the night, dancing, singing, storytelling. At one point, Grace found herself outside, needing air and quiet. Josiah joined her, as she'd known he would. "We did good," he said simply. "We did." "Think the first. Maribel knows, sees." Grace looked at the stars, then at the hall full of light and laughter. "I think she sees, and I think she's proud." They stood together, the cast-out girl and the silent cowboy, now pillars of a community that had once rejected them. Inside, their daughter danced with her new husband, their found family celebrated, and the work of grace continued. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new cast-out souls seeking shelter. But tonight, there was just joy and the knowledge that sometimes, the worst moments of our lives are just the beginning of the best. 10 years later, the Teller Chen Medical Clinic had become the finest facility in 3 territories. Maribel and William worked side by side, treating everyone regardless of ability to pay. Hope, trained as a nurse, ran the children's ward with compassion, born from experience. Grace, now 50, had stepped back from day-to-day mission operations, letting younger hands carry the work forward. But she remained the heart of it all, the story everyone told to explain why Dead Mare Ridge, now officially renamed Hope Springs, welcomed everyone. Josiah, 70 but still strong, continued training horses and young men both. His greatest joy was teaching Maribel's children, twin boys named Samuel and James, to ride. The boys, 6 years old and fearless, treated their great-uncle like a grandfather. "Tell us the story, Uncle Joe," Samuel demanded one evening as they all gathered for Sunday dinner. "Which story?" "The one about Grandma Grace coming to town," Josiah smiled, settling into his chair. Well now, your grandma was just 17, younger than your Aunt Hope. She stood in the middle of Main Street, Grace Avenue now, with no shoes, no money, no family. The boys listened wide-eyed, though they'd heard it dozens of times. How their grandmother had been cast out. How their uncle had taken her in despite his silence. How shame became purpose, and strangers became family. And then what? James prompted at the pause. And then, Grace took over, your mother was born. The most beautiful baby in the world, though she came too early and scared us all. Uncle Joe delivered her with hands gentle as feathers. In the same house where we live, Samuel added proudly. The very same. And from that beginning, a cast-out girl, a silent man, a baby who shouldn't have survived. Look what grew. She gestured around the table. 4 generations gathered. Blood family and chosen family mixed so thoroughly, no one bothered sorting anymore. Former cast-outs who'd become community leaders. Silent souls who'd found their voices. After dinner, as the children played and adults talked, Cooper, ancient now but still sharp, raised a question that had been circling. What happens when we're gone? When the original story keepers pass on? The work continues, Maribel said firmly. The stories get told. New cast-out souls find shelter. The cycle goes on. But it might change, Hope added. Different needs, different approaches. Good, Grace said. It should change. Growth requires change. What matters is the heart of it, that no one faces shame alone, that everyone deserves a second chance. That being cast out can be the first step to being found. The mission's strong, William observed. 12 locations now, hundreds of workers, thousands helped yearly. The foundation will outlast us all. It's not about the mission, Josiah said quietly. Everyone turned to him. He still spoke sparingly enough that each word carried weight. It's about what we each do, every day. Small choices, taking in strangers, speaking for the silent, standing between violence and victims. That's the legacy. Young Samuel tugged on Grace's sleeve. Grandma, will you teach me to help people like you do? You already do, sweetheart. Every time you're kind to someone who's different, every time you share when you could keep, every time you see someone hurting and ask how to help. Is it hard? Sometimes, but the best things usually are. As the evening wound down and families dispersed to their homes, Grace and Josiah sat on their porch, the same porch where so much had transpired. The desert stretched endlessly, but it no longer seemed empty. It was full of stories, connections, invisible threads, binding healing to healing. Any regrets? Josiah asked, their old ritual. None that matter, you? Just one. Wish the first Maribel could see this. Her dream made real, multiplied beyond imagining. She sees, Grace said with certainty, in every white rose, every helped soul, every child born into love instead of shame. She sees. On her 70th birthday, Grace sat at her desk writing. Not mission reports or fund requests, but something more personal. A letter to future generations, to cast out souls not yet born, to those who would need these words. Someday, to whoever finds this, my name is Grace Holloway Teller. Once I was a cast-out girl, pregnant and abandoned, sure my life was over. As I write this, I'm surrounded by family, honored by my community, fulfilled beyond my wildest dreams. This is how it happened. I was 17 when shame found me. The details don't matter. Every generation has its own scandals, its own unforgivable sins. What matters is that when I needed mercy, I found judgment. When I needed shelter, I found closed doors. When I needed family, mine threw me away. But here's what I learned. Being cast out isn't the end. It's a beginning. When everything familiar rejects you, you're free to find where you really belong. When old bonds break, new ones can form. When shame seems total, grace appears in unexpected places. For me, grace came as a silent cowboy who turned out to be family. He couldn't speak, but his actions screamed love. He took me in, not because I deserved it, but because it was right. That single act of kindness rippled outward until it transformed an entire town. If you're reading this because you've been cast out, for pregnancy, for love, for choices, for being, know this. You are not alone. You are not worthless. You are not beyond redemption. You are exactly where some of the strongest people started. Find your silent cowboy, or better yet, be one for someone else. Create the family you need. Build the community that should have existed. Turn your casting out into others gathering in. Practical advice. Shame is loud but temporary. Grace is quiet but eternal. Choose grace. Work hard. Dignity comes from effort, not perfection. Accept help. Independence is overrated. Interdependence is everything. Give help. Healing happens when we heal others. Tell your story, not for pity, but for power. Someone needs to hear that survival is possible, that thriving can follow shame, that being cast out is sometimes being set free. The mission will continue long after I'm gone, but missions are just buildings. What matters is the mission of the heart. To see the cast out, to shelter the shamed, to speak for the silent. That mission belongs to everyone, everywhere, always. My daughter became a doctor. My found sister became a nurse. My silent uncle became a speaker of truth. My broken self became whole through breaking others' chains. This is the arithmetic of grace. It multiplies when divided, grows when given away. Don't let anyone tell you your story is over because of one chapter. Don't believe that mistakes define you. Don't accept that cast out means cast aside forever. You are not your shame. You are not your scandal. You are not what they say you are. You are what you choose to become. And if I, a barefoot, pregnant, abandoned girl, could become this, so can you. Find your people. Build your purpose. Let your casting out become your calling. With love across time, Grace Holloway Teller, the cast-out girl who came home. She sealed the letter, placed it with the mission archives. Someday someone would need these words. Someone always did. That evening, the family gathered for her birthday celebration. The entire town came. Grace Avenue decorated with lights and those ever-blooming white roses. Stories were shared, tears shed, laughter raised. Speech, the crowd chanted. Grace stood, looking out at faces that represented every kind of redemption. Former addicts, now counselors. Former abusers, now advocates. Former cast-outs, now cornerstones. 70 years ago, I was born into a world that would one day reject me. 53 years ago, that rejection happened, and it was the best, worst thing that ever occurred. Murmurs of understanding rippled through the crowd. Because casting out led to finding, shame led to purpose, a silent cowboy's kindness led to all this. She gestured at the gathered community. We are all cast out people, one way or another. Cast out from Eden, cast out from perfection, cast out from others' expectations. But in that casting out, we find each other. We find grace, we find home. She raised her glass. To the cast out ones, may they always find shelter. To the silent ones, may they find their voices. To the shamed ones, may they discover their glory. And to all of us, may we never forget that the stone the builders rejected can become the cornerstone. The toast echoed across Hope Springs, across the decades, across every story of rejection transformed to redemption. And somewhere in the crowd, a young woman clutched her hidden pregnancy, heard the words she needed, and knew that being cast out was not the end. It never was. It was always, always the beginning. Grace died as she'd lived, surrounded by family, purposeful to the end. At 91, she'd seen the mission movement spread nationwide, watched her great-grandchildren take up the work, lived to hold Hope's grandchildren in her arms. Her last words were to Maribel, gray-haired now, but still passionate about healing. Tell them the casting out was worth it. Tell them shame is just labor pains for grace. The funeral drew thousands, not just from Hope Springs, but from every town the mission had touched. Cast out souls who'd found homes, silent voices that had learned to speak, shamed lives transformed to purpose. Josiah had passed 5 years earlier, speaking love to the end. They buried Grace beside him under a canopy of white roses that had spread throughout the cemetery. The graves bore simple markers, Josiah Teller, the silent cowboy who found his. Voice Grace Teller, the cast-out girl who found her home together, they found everyone else. Maribel spoke at the service, her voice strong despite tears. My mother was 17 when this town cast her out. Barefoot, pregnant, alone. Today we name the new medical school after her. The Grace Teller Institute for Healing Arts will train doctors, nurses, counselors, but more than that, it will train hearts. Hearts that see beyond shame to possibility. Hope added her testimony. I came here cast out like my half-sister's mother, but instead of judgment, I found family. Instead of shame, purpose. That's the legacy. Not buildings or programs, but the radical belief that everyone deserves a second chance. Cooper's grandson, now running the mission, read from Grace's final letter to the community. My dear friends, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But casting out and gathering in continue. Every generation faces the choice. Build walls or bridges, offer stones or bread, speak judgment or grace. Choose grace. Always grace. Not because people deserve it, but because grace transforms everything it touches. A silent man becomes a speaker. A shamed girl becomes a leader. A judging town becomes a sanctuary. The work is never done. New ways of casting out always emerge. But so do new ways of gathering in. New voices for the voiceless, new hope for the hopeless. Remember, we were all cast out once. From Eden, from perfection, from someone's heart. But in that casting out, we can find each other. We can build something better than what we left. We can prove that shame is not the end of the story. Thank you for letting a cast-out girl matter. Thank you for becoming the family I needed. Thank you for continuing the work. Until all are gathered in, Grace. After the service, as people shared meals and memories, a young woman approached Maribel. 16, obviously pregnant, tear-stained but determined. "Is it true?" she asked. "About your mother? About starting over?" "Every word," Maribel assured her. "What's your name?" Faith Johnson. "My parents, they said don't come back. I heard about this place, but I thought maybe it was just stories. It's real. You're safe here. You're family now." Maribel put her arm around the girl. "Come, let's get you settled. Tomorrow we'll talk about your future. Tonight, just rest in the knowledge that being cast out is the first step to being found." As she led Faith to the mission, Maribel smiled. Her mother would love this. The cycle continuing, the story never ending. Cast out souls finding shelter, building lives, changing worlds. Today, if you drive through Hope Springs, you'll see Grace Avenue lined with white roses that bloom impossibly year-round. The Teller Museum tells the story of a silent cowboy and a cast-out girl who transformed a town. The mission, now a historic landmark, still shelters those who need it most. But the real monument isn't in buildings or streets. It's in the lives still being transformed, in the young woman who arrives pregnant and ashamed but leaves educated and empowered, in the silent child who finds their voice through patient love, in the violent man who learns gentleness is true strength. The Grace Teller Institute has graduated thousands of healers who carry her philosophy wherever they go. See the person, not the shame. Offer help, not judgment. Build bridges, not walls. At the Institute's entrance stands a statue, not of Grace alone, but of three figures. A young woman, obviously pregnant, stands barefoot but unbowed. A man, weathered by loss, offers her bread. Between them, a child reaches up to both, connecting them. The inscription reads, "She arrived barefoot, bruised, and carrying nothing but shame. He offered shelter without words. Together, they built a world where shame becomes grace." Students, touch the statue for luck before exams. Visitors take pictures. But those who understand bow their heads in recognition of what casting out and gathering in really mean. In the archive, Grace's letters are preserved. Young people doing research discover her words, written decades ago, but fresh as morning. Being cast out isn't punishment, it's possibility. When one door closes violently, sometimes it's because a better door is opening gently. Look for the silent cowboys. Be one when you can. Build the family you need. Create the grace you missed. Her story has been told in books, films, sermons. But it's the untold stories that matter more. Every person who heard her journey and found courage to continue their own. Every cast-out soul who discovered that rejection could be redirection. Faith Johnson, the girl who came to Maribel's arms at the funeral, is a grandmother now. She runs the mission with the same compassion she received. Her daughter, Grace Johnson, serves as mayor. The cycle continues, spirals upward, reaches outward. On quiet nights in Hope Springs, when the wind stirs the roses and the stars shine bright, locals say you can feel them, all the spirits of the redeemed. Grace and Josiah, of course, but also the thousands who passed through, who found shelter, who discovered that being cast out was just the beginning. They whisper to the new arrivals, the latest cast-out souls seeking hope. You're home now. Your family. Your shame is just the shell. Inside is the pearl of who you're meant to be. And always, always someone is there to open the door, to offer bread, to speak the words Grace learned from Josiah's first utterance after 6 years of silence. Stay. Because in the end, that's all any of us want. Someone to see us at our worst and say, stay, you belong here, you matter. Grace Holloway Teller was cast out at 17. She died at 91, having built a movement that saved thousands. But numbers don't tell the story. Hearts do. Changed hearts, healed hearts, hearts that learn to see shame as the beginning of grace. Her grave is never without fresh flowers. Someone is always there. A grateful graduate, a saved soul, a stranger who heard the story and came to say thank you. They leave roses, of course, white ones that bloom impossibly, like hope in a desert, like grace after shame, like families, formed from the cast out and the silent and the lost who find each other. The story ends where it began, with someone falling and someone else choosing to catch them. It ends with the truth Grace discovered that day in the dust. We are all cast out from something. But in that casting out, we can find our truest home. The mission door stays open. The roses keep blooming, the cast out keep coming. And grace, amazing grace, keeps transforming shame into glory, silence into song, strangers into family. Forever and always, until every cast-out soul finds home. Not every outlaw is a criminal, not every silence is empty, and not every child is born unwanted. Sometimes being cast out is really being set free. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one. With courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice. Truth always finds its voice. Grace always finds a way. And somewhere, a silent cowboy is waiting to offer bread to a cast-out soul. The door is open. Come home.